Mikoto leads his group Homura across Shizume City. After a bit of walking, each member heads out on their own, except for the group's sole female Anna, who simply chooses to accompany Mikoto. Just outside a hotel suite, 3 of the Homura members wait patiently as someone prepares a diversion using a pizza delivery excuse. When the door to the suite opens, they quickly attack the person on the other side. Once they've finished their brutal acts of violence, which leaves only the apparent ringleader conscious, the members of Homura begin waiting for Mikoto. Not long after, Mikoto and Anna arrive. Anna proceeds to use her abilities to read the ringleader's thoughts. Unfortunately, she finds that he does not know the answer to her group's questions. They head to the second floor of the hotel where they are confronted by several members of a fellow clan, Sector 4, who are in the hotel's lobby. The leader of Sector 4, Munakata, tells his subordinates to draw their swords for combat. Homura and Sector 4 commence their battle as Sword of Damocles hover above the building, announcing the start of a fight between 2 kings. Elsewhere in the city, students from Ashinaka High School head to their campus. During the lunch break, Kukuri notices that Yashiro is not eating enough vegetables with his lunch and decides to share some of hers with him. While Kukuri is searching for Yashiro, he eats his lunch atop one of the school's buildings, accompanied by a pink cat. While out in the city, Yashiro is spotted by a member of Homura. Several of the members then head out and search for the teenager. Yada, Kawamoto, and Shoi chase Yashiro throughout the city until they corner him in an alley with Kusanagi. Kusanagi attacks Yashiro with numerous fireballs. However, a long-haired individual appears and protects Yashiro, then proceeds to take out 3 of the 4 Homura members. Afterwards, he escapes with Yashiro and the pink cat that has been following him. Kuro identifies himself as a vassal of Meiwa, former 7th king, and that he will slay the Eagle King as to fulfill his master's dying wish, confusing Yashiro with his words. Immediately afterwards, the city's network is hijacked to display a mortifying video. A young man named Tatsuka, who was recording night scenery with a video camera, is shot by an individual who coincidentally resembles Yashiro. Munakata confronts an imprisoned Mikoto, accusing him of being responsible for the live showcasting of the video across Shizume City. Similarly, Kuro points his sword at Yashiro and asks whether he is the same person as the shooter in the video. Yashiro argues that he is innocent and then asks whether Kuro's master ordered him to kill someone without guilt. Kuro proceeds to dispose of Yashiro. However, the teenage student asks to be granted a final request. Yashiro says that he would like to write his younger sister a farewell letter. Kuro reads the letter but realizes from it that Yashiro had been lying the whole time. Yashiro sets off a number of flash bombs. When the light is dimmed, Kuro notices that Yashiro is gone. In another part of the city, members of the Homura relocate to a special surveillance-based van, where Shoi is currently hacking into Shizume City's network system. He sends a post that depicts a bounty request across the city, which provides additional background information on the evil king. Anna tells the members of Homura that Yashiro is nearby. While walking through town, Yashiro sees Kuro near a street corner and quickly retreats. As he does so, Yada attacks Kuro, demanding to know where Yashiro is. Yashiro reveals himself anyways just before Yada and Kuro begin their fight. Yada skateboards on the street to get to Kuro, who attacks with his aura. After an unsuccessful strike at Yada, Kuro uses his ability to tear apart the street, collapsing it, and Yada within. In the meantime, Yashiro returns to his dorm room in his school. As he is thinking about the latest developments, he discovers the cat has disappeared with a naked girl in place. She states that she is Neko. Around the same time, just as school hours end, Kuro arrives at the school. While searching around, he encounters Kukuri, who offers to show him to Yashiro's dormitory. Upon seeing him, Kuro uses his aura to pull himself to the room, where he draws his sword in an attempt to kill him. However, Neko stops him, taking Yashiro away with her. Kuro begins following them across the campus, but each time he corners Yashiro, Neko uses her illusions to distract him. He continues chasing Yashiro, who in turn keeps chasing Neko. By morning, the 3 are left very exhausted and hungry. Yashiro suggests that he and Kuro set aside their differences so that they can eat breakfast. Munakata explains to Mikoto that his Wiseman level is reaching its breaking point and that, should his Sword of Damocles fall, an occurrence will be upon them, leaving behind a mark highly reminiscent of the Kagutsu crater. He also warns Mikoto that he will kill him should he continue drawing power from the Dresden slates. Munakata adds in short summary that he wants Mikoto to remove his status as king. Later in his office, Munakata's subordinate Siri provides reports of the investigated murder of Tatsuka, detailing information on the gun used to kill him and other related materials. While still eating, Yashiro asks about the Homura members who attacked him, and Kuro explains more about clans and kings in general. Once he is informed, Yashiro concludes that Homura wants to kill him because they believe he is the same person who murdered one of their own. Yashiro asks why Kuro wants to kill him. Kuro explains that it is the order he was given by his master, Meiwa, also a king. Meanwhile, Adolf K. Wiseman dances with a woman with various images of Yashiro being displayed with each footstep. Both clans discover the white-haired student on Ashinaka High School. Yashiro, Kuro, and Neko dress themselves in Japanese garments to represent historical figures in Japan's history. Yashiro concludes that if he were to find a person who saw him on the school campus within an hour of 11:45 p.m. on December 7, he'd have an alibi. After many attempts, he finally gets his proof from the school database, which shows that he never passed through their gates to exit the school on the day of the festival. Kuro then decides to accept Yashiro's innocence. Yashiro returns to his room to change. He picks up a shirt, but before taking it out, notices several red blotches stained on the front. Yashiro realizes that it's the same shirt worn at the time of Tatsuka's murder. Meanwhile, at the school's gate, Yada and Kamemoto arrive to deal with Yashiro. Seri and her investigation team soon arrive at the school. While Seri is arguing with the principal to search through their database, a bored Fushimi sneaks out and walks across campus. He heads to the student council's office. Once in, he hacks into the student body database and looks for any matches with Totsuka's murderer. As soon as he finishes up, he goes outside to greet his former clansmen. Both clash using a variety of weapons, though mainly their respective auras. Suddenly, the battle is interrupted by the presence of Seri. Yada walks away with Kamemoto. Kamemoto states that they should go back. Yada agrees, but only after he asks one last person about Yashiro. He meets Kukuri and asks her, though she does not seem to recall knowing the white-haired student. Incidentally, Fushimi reports to Seri that while hacking into the school's database, he did not find anyone who matches up to Totsuka's murderer. Kuro dials Kukuri's number, handing his phone to Yashiro. Yashiro asks her for the fireworks. However, Kukuri states that she does not recognize him and hangs up. He lets Yashiro use his phone again to call his home. Unfortunately, Yashiro discovers that his house number is no longer in service. Yashiro explains what happened when he called his home and thinks of various possibilities as to what the reasons could be. Mikoto then begins reminiscing on the 3 months before Totsuka died. During that day, Totsuka revealed that he bought himself a new camera to record videos and take pictures with. Finally, the night of Totsuka's death is recalled. Kusanagi and Yada find him on a rooftop, alone in his own puddle of blood. Totsuka tries to tell them that the self-proclaimed Colorless King was responsible, though he could not speak further. The suddenness of the event drives Yada to tears. Yashiro and Kuro find themselves at a soccer stadium once it starts raining. Yashiro says that it is supposed to be where his house is. As he ponders, Kuro suggests that he may not be who he believes he is. Yashiro agrees and begins to question whether a person named Yashiro even exists. With this in mind, Kuro reaches out for his sword. However, he explains that he will not kill Yashiro until he knows with absolute certainty that he is guilty. Suddenly, the stadium headlights flash at them. Scepter 4 has surrounded the stadium and a team led by Lieutenant Owashima has entered the grounds. Seri uses a speaker to inform the duo that her clan will be taking them into custody. As they prepare for battle, they are suddenly inflicted with an illusion, one that causes them to see that they are in the streets of Shizume City during the day. Neko is the person responsible. Munakata arrives, having been forced from his leisure at Fushimi's impatience. Upon his arrival, he slowly dispels Neko's illusions while simultaneously identifying them for himself. Realizing who they are now up against, Kuro orders that Yashiro and Neko leave. Kuro reaches out for his sword, Kotowari, which Munakata recognizes as a former possession of his master Miwa. Hearing this, Kuro quickly runs towards Munakata and attacks with multiple palm strikes or kicks, only to receive a taunt and minor injury from the king himself. Munakata explains his reasons for being so keenly interested in the Colorless King before inquiring of Kuro's own, which the latter painfully explains. Suddenly, Yashiro returns to the field that they are in. Yashiro explains that he most likely cannot leave behind his friends. He then apologizes to Kuro for being secretive with him, drawing out a white light from the palms of his hands, which in turn transforms into a giant sword-like object floating in the sky. He then exerts a white force against Munakata, who counters with his aura. This gives opportunity for Kuro to free himself and punch Munakata before fleeing the stadium. Kuro, Yashiro, and Neko eventually regroup all together in a dark alley within the city. Yashiro wonders if Neko can help restore his memories and asks that she makes an attempt. Neko is reluctant to reveal Yashiro's memories, but eventually gives in, showing him her first memory of him. She reveals the night that she met Yashiro in Ashinaka High School's gymnasium around December 7 to 8. In another memory, Yashiro recalls being pushed off a blimp by a silver-haired man, shocking him. Yashiro, Kuro, and Neko manage to find their way back to the bridge that connects to Ashinaka High School. 15 minutes later, Munakata receives a call. Yashiro reveals that he knows of a certain man inside an airship. Furthermore, he believes that the man in the airship is heavily involved with the murder incident involving Totsuka. Unwilling to cooperate to such a request, Munakata is struck with a deal. Yashiro will willingly allow himself to be arrested if he can contact the man in the airship. Munakata remains hesitant, though he eventually agrees to the deal. He subsequently reveals that the man in the airship is also the Silver King, Adolf K. Wiseman. Later, Siri reports that Wiseman still has not responded to them despite having received contacted on 3 occasions in the past 5 hours. Munakata declares that they will now take the Silver King into custody. At Siri's request, Munakata decides to explain as to why he is so forward with the plan. He confirms that while he did take action at the request of Yashiro, there has been suspicious activity from the Silver King's Himmelreich, which has caught his attention in the past few days. Munakata explains that the Himmelreich follows different routes in the air that has not changed in the decades that it has flown yet recently. A certain incident has suddenly disrupted its normal routine, despite there being no evidence of irregularities in the atmosphere. As it turns out, that particular incident was the event of Totsuka's murder. Eventually, Scepter 4 arrives at the airport and prepare to take off in the provided helicopters. Wiseman knocks the woman aside and turns to the helicopters, telling the Blue Klansman to come closer as he laughs maniacally in the night. Yashiro, Kuro, and Neko are able to board a helicopter and camouflage themselves with the other Blue Klansmen. Shortly after, aboard Neko begins tinkering with the helicopter's controls and wanting to get to the Himmelreich before anyone else. Takes hold of the control stick and plummets the helicopter towards the blimp's engines. Suddenly, the blimp explodes and engulfs in red flame. Kunkuri hears a loud explosion outside and looks to see a massive, silver-colored light shimmering in the night sky. She wonders what it really is. We are introduced to a Japanese Lieutenant Kokujoji, who was brought to an underground research facility in Germany during the Second World War. One of the researchers, Adolf K. Weissman, conducts an experiment before the lieutenant using albino mice as test subjects. Placing several mice onto a maze-like tabletop, with certain individuals bearing a color mark on their backs, Weissman uses the markings to respond to the Dresden slate. Such reactions cause potent and color-based aura to shroud over the bodies of the mice, additionally with a sword-like figure to take form above. The Kokujoji believes that it could be used to create superhuman armies, though Weissman disagrees, believing that the aura could instead bring happiness to the world. Suddenly, a red aura of the other albino mice causes an explosion, resulting in the collapse of the experimenting table. Sometime later, air bombers attack the city and leave it in ash ruins. While scouting the area, Kokujoji notices a sword of Damocles floating above and runs to its location. To his horror, he discovers a devastated Weissman cradling his dead sister in his arms. He bids his goodbyes to the Japanese lieutenant before walking to his blimp Himmelreich as Kokujoji angrily asks him if he is running away. Decades later, reports of the crash Himmelreich surface the morning following its tragic end. Akiyama reports to the scene of the crash where he asks who is currently leading the investigation, only to discover that Kokujoji's Gold Klansmen are present in the area. Another team led by Siri goes to personally investigate the helicopter that also crashed with the Himmelreich. Bodies are not recovered, and it is reported that the 3 men who were supposed to have been flying the helicopter are discovered in a hangar far from the area. Inside the headquarters for the Gold Clan, Kokujoji enters a room just above the Dresden slate, additionally, with Weissman's corpse inside a coffin-like capsule. He silently mourns for his former acquaintance. Munakata is then permitted entrance to the room. Munakata asks the Gold King to examine Weissman's corpse. After a personal examination of Weissman's corpse, Munakata takes his leave with Goto and Kamo. Meanwhile, Mikoto receives a telephone in prison. The phone suddenly picks itself up, and the caller on the other end reveals that he is Totsuka's murderer. A white fox-like creature emerges from inside the phone and begins mocking Mikoto as well as his clansmen. Afterwards, he is pulled into an illusion crafted by the fox, which he manages to pull himself out of, using his aura to create a fiery lion within such a state. The fox retreats back to the caller, who is in Yashiro's old room within Ashinaka High School, followed by Mikoto's flame, which ignites the phone, causing an explosion. Mikoto realizes where his target is located and destroys his shackles and the bars keeping him contained in the cell. Despite the security lockdown enforced by the Scepter 4 members, Mikoto destroys them and casually walks out from the now-destroyed building. Siri attempts to bind Mikoto when he refuses to retreat, though her attack is easily dispelled. Subsequently, Mikoto exerts his aura and launches an attack on the clansmen. His flames manage to penetrate Fushumi's barrier and destroy the Scepter 4 headquarters, as well as incapacitate several members. He is greeted by several of his clansmen outside. Mikoto reveals that their target is on Ashinaka High School. Kukuri sees a sword of Damocles hovering in the sky near the entrances. Suddenly, an explosion occurs near the entrances, due to the works of Homura. The students begin running away as soon as Homura emerges from outside the campus. Kusanagi then orders the other clansmen find Yashiro. Despite their efforts, no one can seem to find Totsuka's murderer. Kusanagi later heads out to the courtyards where he meets with Mikoto and Anna. Mikoto leaves Kusanagi and Anna to venture forth into the forests outside the school. There, he finds a stone pathway leading to a shrine within the forests, where he encounters Munakata. Munakata proposes an idea for Mikoto to compromise with, relinquish the school peacefully, and allow Munakata to slay Yashiro in however way Mikoto would prefer. Mikoto refuses. Subsequently, Munakata reminds Mikoto that he is falling apart as a king and should step down from his throne, claiming he is no longer fit to continue his ways. Mikoto still refuses Munakata's offer. Realizing that he cannot change Mikoto's mind, Munakata takes his leave. Yashiro, Kuro, and Neko finally return to Yashiro's now charred room, where they are surprised to see how heavily damaged it has become. They decide to go rescue Kukuri and the other students from the hands of Homura. Late at night in Ashinaka High School, a cloaked man wearing a gold-colored mask plants a timed bomb on the ground near one of the buildings. Scepter 4 continues to wait outside the bridge connecting to the school. Suddenly, a large billow of smoke emerges from the school, causing a loud alarm to ring across the campus. Munakata finally gives his subordinates the call to make their move. They are greeted by a large group of Homura members. Siri asks that the opposing clan to surrender or otherwise face the consequences. Munakata orders Siri to take responsibility and lead their clan from that point onward. Siri then raises her saber while the other blue clansmen follow in conjunction. Similarly, Homura shouts out their war cry and stomps with excitement. Both clans then begin to clash with one another. Munakata, using his aura as a medium, runs across the air to the area behind the school's main building. One corner of it suddenly explodes and the crumbling remains begin to collapse while Eric of Homura is defenseless outside on the ground below, calling out for help. Munakata rushes to Eric's side and uses his aura to stop the rubble to collapse on them both. Eric stabs him in his lower abdomen, grinning sadistically. Moments later, his aura dissipates, causing the rubble of the building to finally collapse. Anna sees a person on the rooftop of a neighboring building. A gunshot suddenly fires at her location, breaking the window near Anna. Kusanagi rushes to her aid and protects her. He looks outside to see a member of Scepter 4 holding a rifle, astonishing him. Masaomi runs in the direction of the sniper. Kusanagi wonders what is happening as Anna worries further for what is about to come. Suddenly, another building explodes, causing the Scepter 4 sniper to be ejected from his location and sent fallen towards Kukuri. Suddenly, Kuro appears and rescues Kukuri, while Yashiro and Neko come running behind him. As they speak, Mikoto himself shows up. Meanwhile, Sari is suddenly attacked by Yada but manages to block his moves. As they begin to fight, Fushimi rushes in to block one of Yada's following attacks. Kuro stands before his group to fight against the Red King alone, though he is thrown aside with ease. Such an action forces Neko to use her own powers to create a distraction, allowing her and her friends to rush to Kuro's side. Mikoto swiftly dispels Neko's illusion and annoyance. Yashiro, Neko, and Kukuri subsequently run away at Kuro's orders. He then engages in a fight against Mikoto, but is completely overpowered. Their fight is cut short by Munakata's and Eric's arrival. Kuro manages to escape and run away with his 3 friends while Mikoto is forced to fight Munakata next. Yashiro, Kuro, Neko, and Kukuri hide out in a shopping building within the school. Kukuri then notices a wound on Yashiro's lower abdomen and asks to see it. However, when he walks towards her, Kukuri suddenly grabs a shard of broken glass and pierces his chest. Her eyes gleam and a dark aura emits from her body. A white, fox-like creature emerges and lunges at Yashiro. The fox-like creature notices that Yashiro has become amnesiac. It begins taunting him for abandoning his responsibilities to live the carefree life that he has been living until very recently. Yashiro starts feeling mentally strained by the creature's words until it tells him to slip into a slumber of nothingness. Suddenly, he visualizes a much younger Kokujoji asking whether he is running away. The fox-like creature escapes back into Kukuri and flees using her body. Yashiro collapses while Neko and Kuro worry for his sake. A silver aura suddenly shrouds over Yashiro's body and he rises from the ground as a much stronger light, also colored silver, is projected into the sky above as a beam. Mikoto and Munakata notice the silver beam of light at the school, astonishing them both. The beam of light then reveals a sword of Damocles hidden within, with several orbs on one side representing the 7 clan colors. Kokujoji senses the presence of that particular sword of Damocles and sighs that the certain he continues to surprise him. Yashiro, speaking in German, informs Kuro and Neko that he is perfectly fine and that he cannot be harmed. Kuro asks whether he truly is the Colorless King. Yashiro shakes his head and instead says that he is the first king, also known as the Silver King, Adolf K. Wiseman. Several days before, Wiseman is visited by a young man resembling Yashiro who proclaims to be new Colorless King. The Colorless King states that he is interested in Wiseman's immortality, and the white fox-like creature emerges from the young man's eyes to enter Wiseman. Wiseman is instantly knocked unconscious from the result of having his body possessed and awakens in the Colorless King's former body. Shocked, he finds himself near the edge of the blimp about to be kicked down by the fox-like creature in his new body, which is Wiseman's very own. Wiseman, still in the body of Yashiro, explains that he and the new Colorless King essentially exchanged bodies. Furthermore, the only reason why he wasn't completely possessed is because he is the Silver King. Yashiro adds that the fox-like creature who is now king has currently taken over Kukuri's body, and thus he must save her. He then requests that Kuro and Neko help him accomplish his goal. Meanwhile, Homura and Scepter 4 continue fighting outside, leading to several clansmen on both sides to begin suffering casualties. Steri grows worrisome over the matter until she, as well as the others, notice Munakata's and Mikoto's sword of Damocles hovering above and clashing with the other. While scanning the area, she sees Yashiro and Neko hovering above, which startles Siri. Yashiro lowers himself and Neko to surface level. Siri strikes at him with her saber, but discovers that she cannot touch him. However, instead, due to her developing an indirect link with Yashiro's aura, she too is affected by its power, and she begins floating. Yashiro explains the reason behind the event. Subsequently, his aura engulfs the three individuals into two sphere-like objects, in which they all use as a method of speedy transportation across the school. Meanwhile, Kuro enters the battlefield of the Red and Blue Klansmen. He knocks out a group of Klansmen from both forces, alerting the rest and halting them momentarily. He tells them all to cease fighting, as it is the order of the Silver King. In response, both clans remind Kuro that they do not serve the Silver King and thus have no reason to listen to him. The three then prepare for a fight with each other. Anna suddenly feels the presence of a king and goes to open the window. Moments later, Yashiro and his temporary Silver Klansmen enter the room through the building. Kusanagi and Sholei grow suspicious but are told by Anna that they are not their enemies. Soon after, Kusanagi's cell phone begins ringing, which Yashiro assumes is because someone in particular would like to speak with him. Kusanagi discovers that the Gold King Kokujoji is speaking on the other end. The Colorless King watches Mikoto's and Munakata's fight from afar on a tree branch. Kusanagi and Siri begin taking charge of the situation while Yashiro speaks privately with Kokujoji over the phone. The two discuss matters that Yashiro must attend to. Kusanagi and Siri report that they have regained control and now have the rest of their clansmen following their commands. Suddenly, the Colorless King speaks to each individual within the school's campus through telepathic means, taunting and frightening them with his plans to use them for his own personal gain. After a bit of talking, his voice goes silent. Afterwards, Neko uses her power on the entire school to create several illusions of Yashiro before many groups of students. The students vaguely remember Yashiro outside of him being the supposed murderer of Totsuka, though they eventually decide to listen to his voice and have him lead them all to safety. After hearing Yashiro's message, the Colorless King begins suffering, though he remains fierce about letting his plan succeed. He begins walking back to the school while the personalities of the other souls slowly begin to take over. Kukuri's voice manages to reach out and she weakly asks for someone to help her. Kuro continues his own fight against Yada and Fushimi, easily knocking down both. While lying on the ground, Yada suddenly experiences a burst of pain, which Fushimi investigates to discover that his insignia is emitting a red glow. Fushimi realizes that Mikoto is about to lose control of his power. Kawamoto then arrives to pick up Yada and Fushimi so he can get them off the island to be with everyone else. As they leave, Yashiro floats down beside Kuro. Yashiro repeats their main objective, which is to rescue Kukuri, and that for it to succeed, he will need Kuro's help. However, to Yashiro's shock, he then kneels down and asks his former master, Miwa, whether he can serve a new king. He then sets down his sword and proclaims that he will serve the Silver King and become one of his clansmen from that point onward. Yashiro politely ignores Kuro's words and tells him to go, granting the latter's silver aura. Meanwhile, the Colorless King dances around with glee at the prospect of his succeeding plan as the personalities of those he absorbed begin to take over. Yashiro and Kuro approach him soon afterwards. The Colorless King attempts to flee from them both, but Kuro manages to stop him. He then proceeds to draw out Kotowari and prepare to slay him for being evil, adding that he will not allow someone such as him to succeed Miwa. Before he can perform the act, Kukuri's body is suddenly freed from the Colorless King's control, though Yashiro becomes the evil being's newest host. However, Yashiro manages to trap the Colorless King within his body while still retaining some control over himself. He asks Kuro to leave with Kukuri while he goes on to face Mikoto and Munakata alone. Kamamono and Yada return to their clan underneath the bridge to the island. Yada angrily asks as to why they are simply abandoning their king, but is smacked on the head by Kusanagi for his rashness. Anna, however, suddenly gets up and goes to look back at the island. On the island, Yashiro unexpectedly interferes with Mikoto's and Munakata's battle. Weakened due to the Colorless King, he tells Mikoto to kill him, since he hosts the soul of Totsuka's murderer within him. Mikoto thanks Yashiro and proceeds to pierce through his chest with his arm. This results in a massive explosion on the island that engulfs most of its forested areas. Kuro stops to look back at the school while still carrying Kukuri in his arms. Kukuri awakens, though she wonders what has occurred. As the explosions finally subsides, Mikoto takes a deep breath, while Munakata stands near him. Then the orb on Mikoto's sword of Damocles fails to emit a glow, causing it to abruptly fall down to Mikoto below. Before it can hit the king, Munakata uses his saber to pierce through Mikoto's chest, ultimately stopping the massive figure from fully collapsing. Mikoto warily says a few words before he finally dies. Munakata later walks away from the island and back to the bridge, where he reunites with his clan. Anna senses Mikoto's death from the other side of the bridge, causing her to burst into tears while she cries out his name. She and the other clansmen of Homura share a long moment of silence for their fallen king. The silence is broken when Kamamono begins to cry out the motto of Homura, which his other clansmen take part in. As they continue to shout out, suddenly, their auras begin to shroud over their bodies before finally escaping into the sky above. Kuro and Neko return to the site of the explosion that evening, where they discover Yashiro's umbrella stuck in the ground. Neko claims she will return it to Yashiro despite Kuro's attempts to state that he is already dead. However, when he remembers Yashiro proclaiming himself to be immortal king, he admits that Yashiro is their king. Sometime after, a dog and a cat run away from Ashinaka High School and out from the bridge leading back to Tokyo Metropolis. The black and white dog runs with a kotawara tied to its side, while the pink cat has Yashiro's parasol on its back. As the Red Clansmen continue to cry out their motto, Kusanagi asks his former king silently if they could hear them, and that he was the best king they could have ever asked for.